Welcome to Purpose Driven Church for Unificationists. We're on day 14, and today we're going to look at the next chapter, What Drives Your Church? So Rick Warren starts off by sharing a hypothetical story about a church council or board that's meeting to discuss their plan for the year. And you've got all these different people who are sharing what they feel the church should be focusing on. So someone will say, hey, well, let's just do what we did last year. It was fine. We don't need to try anything new. Another person might say, you know what, times are changing. We really need to try new things, and we need to reassess everything that we did. We can't just assume it'll work again. Another person will say, you know what, I think that we should really start a school. Or another person will say, I was really inspired by this ministry. It really helped me a lot in my life, and I think we should focus on that. Another person will say, hey, we should try to help out with this nonprofit organization, and so on and so on and so on. And they're all good suggestions, but it's an opportunity for a lot of different conflicting or like at least different driving forces to kind of try to compete over attention or resources without necessarily a clear way to unify those ideas to a common goal. And Rick Warren says, every church is driven by something. There is a guiding force, a controlling assumption, a directing conviction behind everything that happens. It may be unspoken, it may be unknown to many. Most likely it's never been officially voted on, but it is there, influencing every aspect of the church's life. What is the driving force behind your church? He goes on to talk about different kinds of churches and what they're driven by. He talks about churches driven by tradition, churches driven by personality. He talks about churches driven by finances, programs, buildings, events, seekers. It's very interesting. There's a lot to look at there. You have to kind of look at each one and he kind of talks about the shortcomings of each different kind of church. I thought one in particular was interesting. Churches driven by events. I feel like that there's a lot in there that reminds me of our movement. It says, if you look at the calendar of an event-driven church, you might get the impression that the goal of the church is to keep people busy. Something is going on every night of the week. As soon as one big event is completed, work begins on the next one. There is a lot of activity in churches like this, but not necessarily productivity. A church may be busy without having a clear purpose for what it does. Someone needs to ask, what is the purpose behind each of our activities? In the event-driven church, attendance becomes a sole measure of faithfulness and maturity. We must be wary of the tendency to allow meetings to replace ministry as the primary activity of believers. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Anyway, all of them have a lot of merit, so definitely worth looking at. But what he's saying is that fundamentally, all these things are not necessarily bad, but if you want your church to be successful and you want your church to grow, there has to be a clear vision. So what he says is that what is needed today are churches that are driven by purpose instead of by other forces. Your church, regardless of its size or location, will be healthier, stronger, and more effective by becoming a purpose-driven church, hence the name of the book. It says strong churches are built on purpose. Nothing precedes purpose. The starting point for every church should be the question, why do we exist? Until you know what your church exists for, you have no foundation, no motivation, and no direction for ministry. If you serve in an existing church that has plateaued, is declining, or is simply discouraged, your most important task is to redefine your purpose. Forget everything else until you have established it in the minds of your members. Recapture a clear vision of what God wants to do in and through your church family. Absolutely nothing will revitalize a discouraged church faster than rediscovering its purpose. If you ask typical church members why their church exists, you'll get a variety of answers. Most churches do not have a clear consensus on this issue. But strong churches are not built on programs, personalities, or gimmicks. They are built on the eternal purposes of God. So what Rick Warren is really driving here at this time is that, yes, there are many different purposes of churches, and there are different needs that can be fulfilled by a church. But we shouldn't be driven by those things, and that shouldn't be our purpose. Our purpose fundamentally is something that is based around God's purpose and not necessarily our own personal interests. But if we can find that purpose and we can create a sense of identity within that purpose, something that all leader and members of the community can feel like we're working together to create this purpose and to fulfill this purpose that's important to God, then that's where we can be clear about what we're trying to do, what we're not trying to do, and how can we get there, and what is important and what is not important to fulfill that purpose. All right, thank you very much. See you tomorrow.